Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Welcome to the Lambom Show. Today is Wednesday, August 10th, 2022, and we are beginning a series examining the recently released US Africa strategy. This was released 2 days ago by the Secretary of State while on tours in Africa, precisely in South Africa. And I'm very grateful, very gracious to my boss, my friend, Nii Akuetteh. Nii Akuetteh is a household name in the policy space in Washington, D.C. If you are dealing with anything Africa and you have not met Nii Akuetteh, then you are still to get to that analysis. He has a very long bio that I don't want to bore people with, but you can check Nii. The simple thing with him is a policy analyst with everything and anything related to Africa. He has been living in Washington, D.C. for a long time. He himself can tell you that story, how he came here, when he came here. He's a Ghanaian, say Ghanaian American, and he has led maybe 5 NGOs here in the United States and has too many stories. But for today, we want to focus on US-Africa policy, US-Africa relations. And so we have the US strategy towards Sub-Saharan Africa. That's what it's called. That was released on Monday. And today we just want to do a general introduction. We are going to get back into it. Nii and I actually belong to a group called ATNA. I would say it's a think tank. It's Advocacy Network for Africa. It's grassroots organizations. You have many organizations and individuals who have come together to share views, opinions, and try to see how to push the US government to actually take up its commitment towards Africa. Welcome, Nii.
Thank you so much, Lambert. It's such an honor to be on your show.
So again, you and I, as I said, we come a long way, and there are too many things that we can talk about, at least not soccer, because Ghana always, they have tried many times to beat Cameroon, but it has not worked. But we'll keep that for a different day. Today, let's focus on the US-Africa policy. So
certainly,
there is, I'm sure you have gone through it, is a beautiful document, and I want to give you the opportunity to lay the groundwork. What is your original impression of this document?
Thank you so much. Again, I'm very happy and honored to be here. Just on the intro, I just want to say, yes, I have been in charge of 5 NGOs, but 3 were in Washington and 2 were in West Africa, or in Abuja in Nigeria, and then in Accra. So I actually do my advocacy both in Africa and in the US, and I've lived in the US for decades now. Now, yes, my impression of the brand new President Biden's, the Biden administration's strategy on Africa, as you rightly said, it was released on Monday while Mr. Blinken, the Secretary of State, was in South Africa. My impression of it is actually 3. I have 3 overall takes from it. Number 1 is that I think it's about time that we got a strategy. But what we do have has many good words in it that covers a lot of it is actually looking to the future. That in the future, from this point on, this is what we want to do with Africa. So that's number 1. Number 2, then, as you rightly said, Lambert, we belong to an organization, a collection of organizations and individuals called the Advocacy Network for Africa. We usually meet in Washington, but we have people all over the US, and even more importantly, we have groups and individuals across the African continent, and we put our heads together. I bring that up because, to me, the second point about the strategy is that, this is a strategy for an administration led by a president and a vice president who are politicians who were elected. Politicians will state what they think you want to hear. Then it is up to people who are serious to make them live by what they have said. So for me, this is where ADNA comes in. We need to read these documents line by line, whether we see where we agree with and where we don't agree, get it changed. But also where we do agree, we have to push the administration very hard. This is not a matter of whether you like the administration or not. We like them a lot, but still we want to see policies that are good for Africa and incidentally good for the United States. I happen to think that with our work and with the work of allies, the United States can craft a policy that serves American interests, but also serves African interests. So we have to push them to put into practice what they have stated, especially in the areas where they are saying they will do things that are good for both Africa and the United States. It's not like, okay, this is just to advance US interest and forget about Africa. Nor is it a situation where we will say, you owe this to Africa, just do this for Africa, and we don't care about US interests. No, it is both countries. Africa, of course, is not a country. We have 54 countries, actually, but our common interest can coincide with that of the United States, and we need to push that. I'll give you one quick example, and they mention all these areas, and Lambert, I hope you won't hold it against me, because in addition to you and I serving in ADNA, we also serve in one of the working groups, which I think is very important, which is security, and we'll get to that. But I'm not going to use the security, what the document says about security for now. I'm going to use what it says about democracy. The US, the document has beautiful words about democracy. But my impression is the US also supports too many dictators, and it turns a blind eye to dictators that it thinks are its friends. So we in ADNA have to push them to say, no, you say you support democracy, you have to abandon dictators, you don't need them, and Africa certainly doesn't need dictators. That is my opinion.
Thank you very much, Nii. And it's kind of strange that you mentioned that the document is more futuristic, it's more for the future. And I seem to agree with you, because by the time a new administration comes in place, they should already have policies that are designed to cover some of these issues. I know that ADNA, for example, worked on a policy document that is submitted to the White House on Africa. And so it's kind of strange that 20 months since Biden took office, it is now they're coming up with a strategy when they have, call it maybe another 20 months to go in order for this administration, presuming that they don't get reelected, which is a nightmare that we don't want to think about. But I mean, what causes this? What is this? Call it the break between the policy that was supposed to be in place on the first day, and we are only having it 20 months down. And so, why looking to the future?
I think that is a great point you make, and there are two bits to it. You are right that whenever any administration comes in, which is if it goes by elections and not because something happens to the president, an administration takes over on January 21. And so it's been a year and a half before they've come up with that. But that is not unique to them. Every administration, now, on the one hand, they run on a platform. When the president wants to win, they will issue a platform. You can go in there, you can see what they said about they will do on everything, Africa, Europe, domestic policy. But once they take office, it never fails. They only do bits and pieces of it, and the excuse you could make for them is that, especially when they are taking over from an outgoing administration of a different party, they are supposed to get thick handover books to look at the specific details, information that they didn't have before. So it takes every new administration a while to study those. It also takes them a while for their people to be confirmed by the Senate, because the policies have to be implemented by officials. By the time they appoint their people and the Senate confirms them, it's almost the end of the 2 years. As we speak, some Africa-related positions in the Biden administration are still not filled. So I think the delay, a bit of it, what I'm saying is is sort of par for the course. Every administration takes months to come up with its policies for different areas. Of course, as an African, I don't like the fact that strategy on Africa for almost every administration is one of the last to be brought. And it shows you that, in my opinion, Africa doesn't enjoy the priority that I would like it to enjoy. But again, I'll say that is up to us, Lambert, me and you and our allies. Let's do our homework and let's put pressure on every administration so that actually we need to put the fear of God in them so that they will say, hey, any administration that takes over, make sure you don't make the Africa lobby angry. Right now, they hardly seem to think there is an Africa lobby. So we need to do a better job. But with the Biden administration, I also think part of the delay is there have been some unique global events that have happened. The war in Ukraine is one. They took over on COVID. And another big issue of concern to us in Africa and African activists is climate justice, as I call it. It is hammering Africa. I'm saying it has delayed things, but not because climate justice is new. It's been there for a while, but there's been a lot of push because a lot of big countries ignored it for a while. Now it's hard to ignore it, so everybody has had to scramble. And when you look at this strategy, they have a section on climate. They call it, part of it is just transition to energy. So because of these new global issues of urgency, I think that may have delayed them a bit.
Yeah, thank you, Nii. And again, you raise up too many issues there. We're going to talk about, the seeming, I don't know how this document was crafted, but looking at the person who was in charge of that, Judd, who came in from CSIS, and I know he led a series of things. He used to be Africa Policy Director at CSIS, and so that's a process. But we'll talk about that because it seems as if there's a missing African diaspora, yes, whose contribution has not been sought in a certain sense in these documents. But again, just going back to the Biden administration, I know how heated the primaries, the elections were, and how many Africans looked forward to a change because seemingly the Trump administration had put Africa and Africans on the back. And so many Africans were hoping for some revival. Now, do you think the Biden administration has delivered on the promises they made to Africa and Africans in the United States?
No. Short answer, no. Definitely not. I am not happy. So that's the first definite answer. If the show stops now, that is my answer. Since we are still on the air, I can expand on it a little bit. And part of expanding on it is you use the word hope. I have lived in Washington long enough, and I have worked in other African capitals from Abuja to Johannesburg to Accra to Abidjan to Dakar, to know that everywhere you have politics, this saying applies. Hope is not a policy. You can hope that the administration will do something for you, even if you gave them money to get them elected. You just don't go back to bed and say, okay, now that I give them money, I hope they will do what I want. Actually, getting them elected is the easy part. The hard part starts when those that you supported have gotten elected. Now, then you must raise your game and you must put pressure on them to do what it is that they had promised you they will do. Because when you are giving them money, they will make you promises. That's why you give them money. The hard part is once they take office, you have to put pressure on them to make so that they can do what you want them to do. So I agree with you that, to my mind, the Trump administration was a disappointment on Africa. Remember that reportedly former President Trump called Africa S-hole countries, okay? But when President Biden took over, he brought in a new change. He sent a very nice message in February, less than a month after he had been in office. In February, he sent a very nice message to the African Union that was meeting. So they came in with this hope that we have, but I'm saying we need to go beyond the hope. We need to push them. One very quick anecdote, and I've heard many different versions of it. People who know Washington, going back to the 30s and 40s, I'm talking about 1930s and 40s, they would tell you that somebody like President Roosevelt, who is the longest FDR, people will go to him and say, oh, yeah, we have a great idea for what you should do. And people he likes, he's having dinner with them, and then he will tell them, I hear you, your idea is good, but here is what you need to do. You need to go out in the street and organize and march and demonstrate and even call me names, put pressure on me so that I can do it. Telling a politician do something and just leaving it at that won't be done. So again, I bring it back to something I've said a couple of times already. It is up to us and ADNA and build a coalition and put pressure on the Biden administration to do what we want them to do, especially now that they have it in writing. We need to put pressure on them, and they are not going to resent us for doing that. Actually, they are going to love us for doing that, because they can say to others, well, you see how much pressure we are getting, we have to do this. If we don't push them, then we give them an excuse not to do what we are asking for.
So again, I think if I hear you correctly, the problem is us, because we seem to be riding up on hope and not doing enough to be able to push the administration to deliver. And
Precisely.
I mean,
Precisely.
Yeah. So let's just focus for that in a minute, if I may.
Yeah.
George Bush gave Africa PEPFAR.
Yes.
Clinton gave us AGOA.
Yes.
For that. And
yes.
Then Obama gave us, call it the Young African Leaders Initiative, YALI, plus Power
YALI, yes. Yes.
There's nothing we could count from the Trump administration in relation to Africa. But I think at this point, what would you hope, what do you hope the legacy of President Biden should be with respect to Africa? I know they have put in place something called Prosper Africa, which is an agency. I think there are 17 agencies that are coordinating different projects and different initiatives in Africa. I mean, it's following up on Power Africa that Obama started. But what if you had to meet President Biden and ask him for one thing for Africa, what would that be?
Well, I was thinking of a couple. Now you made it tough for me that I have to pick one. You know, Washington is buzzing because the analysis is that by the end of this week, Nancy Pelosi's House will pass the Inflation Reduction Act, which is a name designed to calm Americans that are worried about inflation. But the biggest chunk in that law would, because the Senate just passed it and President Biden has been wanting it, the biggest chunk is a lot of money to address climate change, climate emergency. So if I were to meet the president now, I will say find a way to devote a chunk of that money to Africa, because climate change is devastating Africa. And we, in fact, as you know, Lambe, you and I mean, you are a great journalist and you are a wordsmith, and we talk about these things and we say, no, we should call it climate justice. It is climate justice because the rich countries, the United States, China, Western Europe, they are responsible for 90% of the gases that warm the globe, which is causing big problems. The problems Africans are suffering from it. So they get rich by warming the planet. We pay the price. So they need to take a little bit of their wealth to help Africa. So if I were to meet the president, I will say that to him. If you are his aide and you say only one thing you can ask him, but I will push you to say, look, let me also ask about COVID, okay? Because the U.S. could have done much more on COVID. They did not donated some COVID vaccines, but what South Africa has led Africa and India to say is, we want to make our own vaccines, help us with the recipe, so to speak. And the US and the Europeans have dragged their feet. They don't want to do that. So manufacturing COVID vaccines is something I will ask. Also, we are on the security working group in Africa. What breaks my heart is you've got conflict everywhere. Lambert, you mentioned, and I'm not talking about friendly conflict between you and me over soccer, you being from Cameroon, me being from Ghana. There is a three-headed war, as I call it, in Cameroon. Nigeria has serious security issues, including terrorists hitting Abuja, okay? West Africa is groaning under conflict. And North Africa, we won't even go to the Horn of Africa, Ethiopia, Somalia, okay? And then Southern Africa is not safe. We have Mozambique. And when Blinken, as we said, was in South Africa, when he left, guess where he is? He went to DRC, and I think today he's supposed to be in Rwanda because the Great Lakes is also caught in conflict. So I will ask him to deal with climate change. I will ask him to deal with COVID. I will ask him to help Africa silence the guns, help the African Union silence the guns. And finally, there is the issue of food security. So even if you are the tough aide to him and you say, listen, Mr. Akuetteh, you have only one chance to ask him, I will squeeze in 4 asks.
And that is just typical Africans. We don't know how to stick to things. We have too many. But my question to you on the security front is simple. Why do we have to rely on foreign partners to come and clean the house for us? What is wrong with us Africans that we cannot clean our own act? Why do we have to be calling on the US administration and these people around? Who are the very people who are funding these wars? Isn't it? Why do we have to rely on them?
That is a great question. And the simple answer is we have to rely on them because honesty requires us to say that we have our hands full, okay? The terrorists that are swamping any African country that you can name has its hands full. And usually the terrorists are not just people in their countries, okay? Look, if you look in the document that we are discussing, the strategy, Africa strategy, even the Biden administration says, yes, 2 of the big instigators of terrorism in Africa are Al-Qaeda and ISIS. Well, those are organizations from the Middle East. The US focused on the Middle East and beat them, but they didn't destroy them. What they did was push them into Africa, okay? We also know that the Western countries played a big role in the war in Libya, where Colonel Gaddafi was killed. And because of that, all kinds of arms flowed into Africa. So the wars that we have in Africa are not always of African origin. Many of them come from the outside. That's why we need outside help. But also, I'm saying, my first part is we have to be honest that we are overwhelmed. And we shouldn't be ashamed. There's been 2 world wars that started in Europe. The Europeans couldn't contain it. It took the Americans to intervene twice in order to help the Europeans win the war. And of course, they do fancy things with words, okay? You are a wordsmith, so they call it a world war. But it was a war that started in Europe. It was like a European civil war, okay? Right now, the big issue is Ukraine. Are we saying that Ukraine alone should fight the Russians? No. The US is using your tax money, my tax money, and our moral authority to go to the rescue and assistance of the Ukrainians. And I think they should do that. So I'm also saying, if they are going to support Ukraine when it is under vicious attack, then unless they want to tell me that they think Ukrainian lives are more important than African lives, also when Africans need help, when they have done their best and they are being overwhelmed, then the US cannot say, okay, when it comes to Africa, we don't care, but when it comes to Ukraine, we care. But you have a third point, and I agree with you. We need to do a lot more, including preventing the issues that lead to war in Africa. But having done our best, we shouldn't be ashamed to demand the help of the US.
So thank you, and again, we can have this debate all night. I want us to get back to the policy. One of the things that struck me initially is when you look at the executive summary, the first line there says Sub-Saharan Africa is critical to advancing our global priorities. And I'm like, what are they talking about? How is Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, critical? Because if we're that critical, This document will not have taken 20 months. You know, so again, what is it just for the sake of, you know, when you want to woo a woman, you have to flatter her and then tell her some good things. I mean, that may be a wrong analogy, but again, for me, that is how it feels. That is just mere words, which concretely, I don't think the people who are designing this policy really believe. If they did, their actions are not pointing to that direction.
I I
Comment.
I, complete, I completely agree with you. Actually, I mean, you use the analogy of wooing a spouse. I will also use the analogy of advertisement. Okay, you know, whatever you want to buy, they will show you a beautiful picture. Okay, a promise. Question is, what they sell you, is it does it live to the promise? And of course, in this situation where it's a matter of policy, it is up to us, the Africans, however we define ourselves, okay, whether it's just the African leaders or African voters on the continent, we have to say, this is what the US is saying. We have to, so to speak, look under the hood to see whether they are serious. And the point that you make is so right, that they begin with words that you have difficulty believing. If we are vital, why do you take so long? Okay, the Secretary of State is now in Africa. How many times had he been in Africa before? Compare that to how many times he's been to Europe. Okay, so there are so many things I could tell you. Frankly, until now, I have been disappointed by the administration's attention to Africa. But I do believe that it is up to us to push them. One other thing that I'll add, I also think the tenor of the document is being put in a political environment. The Biden administration is looking over its shoulders at the Republicans at the next, midterm elections, and then in 2 years, the presidential elections. So this document has Africa's name on it, and you will think it's just meant for Africans. They are also looking at, okay, we have to state things that the Republicans can't use against us. So some of it is directed at them. So it's a matter of sort of political advertisement for US voters.
Yeah, and the next line of that document says they give you four areas, isn't it? They say it has one of the world's fastest growing populations.
Yes.
Okay. Secondly, the largest free trade areas, the
Yes.
most diverse ecosystems, and one of the largest regional voting groups in the United Nations. That last part is what is annoying. They have the largest regional voting groups, but when it comes to the Security Council, Africa has no voice. So again, the hypocrisy, if I may, if I may, what is it? Why are they trying to flatter Africa to say we are that important when they know that we are not?
Because they want us to look at that document and feel good. Okay, it's partly it's meant to be a feel good document, but it is up to us to read and raise the questions that you are raising. So you are doing exactly what I will advise we should do. Read everything closely and raise questions about it. This point about 28% of the UN, the 54 African countries, they are 28% of the General Assembly, but we don't have a single permanent seat in the Security Council. We get 3 non-permanent ones because the Security Council was designed right after the Second World War. If you look at, it took China a long time to fight its way into it. And when they got it, Ronald Reagan was insulting Africans for celebrating that China, especially the Tanzanians, because the Sahara Railroad has been built. So they were happy when China finally made it into the UN instead of Taiwan. Ronald Reagan was governor in California, and he was incensed, and he was calling us racist things. The point is, the Security Council that we have now is what was designed at the Bretton Woods conference, and the winners of the Second World War, which is why you have France, you have Britain, you have the US, you have Russia, and now we've added China because they are so big. But Germany is not there, Japan is not there, even though they are very powerful with big economies because they lost the Second World War. So this is a remnant of the Second World War. Now, a lot of people are pushing. And by the way, I think people who've been following Mr. Blinken and this document, they know that everybody, a lot of analysts are saying, oh, Mr. Blinken went to Africa because Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, was also there. Sergei Lavrov, before he went, he was there about 3 weeks ago. Before he went, he also did an op-ed, and he was saying, well, yeah, we want the Africans to get a Security Council permanent seat. And Samantha Power, the U.S. Agency for International Development Administrator, was asked, and she said, well, where were the Russians? Why didn't they make that argument for the almost 80 years that the Security Council has been in power? Has been set up. So each of them uses it. Each of them is trying to woo us. So actually, your analogy is right on point. In fact, I teach at George Washington University. I'm on medical leave until I fix my eyes. And one of the things is Africa's international relations. Basically, what you said is true. It's like 4 big powers: Western Europe, the United States, Russia, and China. They are all wooing Africa. So it's up to the Africans to evaluate each of them very carefully, see through their lies, and see when they are lying and when they are not. In fact, I'm fond of saying, there are people who say the West colonized Africa, which is true, and after slavery. So they say we shouldn't trust the West, and I say it is true, but we shouldn't trust the Europeans either. They are part of the West. We shouldn't trust the Russians either, and we shouldn't trust the Chinese. I get dismayed when I see many very bright Africans who are like, well, China didn't colonize us, so we should trust them. And I'm saying, you want to trust them only after they've colonized you? No. One colonization is enough. We should check everybody and say, we will deal with you, but when you come to Africa, we have a lot of resources. The document says it. Anybody who shows up in Africa, we need to know they are there, no matter what they say, no matter what lies they tell us. They are there for our resources. Let's make sure we give it to them at a price that is very good for us and that we get good things in return. And to do that, I think we in ADNA, because we are privileged, we live in the United States, we live in Washington, D.C. We could walk, a good walker could walk from where any of us live to the White House, to the Congress. It is that close. So we are the spear tip for putting pressure on the United States to make sure that, actually the document is a good first step, but it is the first of many, many, many more steps to come. We need to, okay, now you put it there. And Lambert, you raise a good point. How was this document put together? How much of African input was there? But for now, it is here. Now we need to really push them to make sure they implement it the way we would like to see it implemented.
If you are just joining us, you're coming onto the Lambom Show with me on set. It's Nii Akuetteh, Africa policy analyst based in Washington, D.C., and we are discussing the U.S. strategy towards Sub-Saharan Africa that was just released on Monday. I've been, again, thinking about the way it is framed, because the major word that I see there is this strategy reframes the region's importance to U.S. national security interests. Reframes. And I'm wondering, because during the
Trump
administration, the policy that came out, National Security Advisor John Bolton was very clear. It was against Russia and China. And that is also very clear in this document. You can also see that what the U.S. is trying to do is to position itself on the continent in such a way that the increasing influence of Russia and China is met with. So what is the reframing they are doing here? For me, it's a continuity of the same policy under Trump.
You have an excellent point. I think in large parts, especially when it comes to what all the different administrations call great power competition, great power rivalry. We are going to compete with other powerful countries in for Africa's attention. When they are talking to you, they'll say, "Oh, for Africa's attention," but what they really mean is for Africa's resources. Okay, so yes, there's that competition, and in that, you are absolutely right. Whether it is Mr. Trump or any other administration, they want to say, whatever Africa has that is valuable, we want to get it. We don't want the Chinese to get it. We don't want the Russians to get it. Now, they speak very softly. One of the glaring silences in this document to me, Lambert, is that there is very little mention of the Western Europeans. Okay? And they are closest in geography to Africa. They are the ones that colonized Africa. A lot of African resources are taken by the Western Europeans, but because they are American allies, you don't hear that. So you will think that it's just a competition between the United States and China and Russia. And in that sense, you are right. I don't think it's going to change anytime soon. Whatever the administration that you get in Washington, it cannot afford to say, okay, we are not competing with the Russians in Africa. We are not competing with the Chinese in Africa. In fact, one reason they are emphasizing that now is there are many experts who think that the U.S. is behind, okay? Russia has expanded its footprint. There are some people I know who believe wrongly that the U.S. is the largest arms supplier to Africa. That is wrong. Russia is the largest supplier of arms to Africa. China is the biggest, has the biggest economic footprint on the continent. And the U.S. doesn't have much of a a military footprint on the continent either. Okay, so in all those three areas, the U.S. is behind. And I'm saying, what I'm leading to is that the fact that they say, oh, we are doing this is because they are trying to cover up with words the fact that they are falling behind. You mentioned George Devamont, who is true. He used to run the Africa program at CSIS, and now is in the White House. And there's the understanding that he led in doing this paper. The interesting thing is that if you go back to the CSIS website, a couple of years back, when the Trump administration was in power, Judd did a very good brief. That said, the title was, "The World is Going to Africa Except the U.S." Another way of putting it is that the U.S. was ignoring Africa. Okay, and so now I think he's writing that with that in mind. But to get to the core of your last question is, yes, they are doing the same thing. They are still saying the same thing that Trump said. We are going to compete with the Chinese. We are going to compete with the Russians. And my point is, I don't see any U.S. administration that will not say that. In fact, the opposite side, if they craft the right policy, for me, one of my concerns, one of my criticisms is the U.S. has all the resources. If it will do the right thing, if it wants a good partnership with Africa, it should be so good that no other country should come close. The United States has almost 40 million people of African descent. Do I need to remind anybody that the Vice President of the United States today is a woman of African descent? The Secretary of Defense is a man of African descent. We have about 46 members of Congress that are people of African descent, okay? So the U.S. has this sort of group of people of African descent large that no other superpower has. It hasn't used them well, and part of it is that we in ADNA need to link up with them. But if we link up and form a strong coalition, we can get the U.S. and Africa to partner in a way that benefits Africa and benefits the U.S. So it shouldn't even be a contest where the U.S. is competing with China. The U.S. should be beating China hands down if its policies were right. The Chinese have less than 1 million Africans in China in a population of 1.4 billion. So it's not even 1%. The United States has so many people of African descent who care about the continent. It needs to deploy them properly so that there is good relations between the U.S. and Africa. I mean, if the U.S. wants good policies on Cameroon, I have one name for them. Talk to Lambert.
Thank you, Nii. Again, the problem we have, I mean, and that's the point we are going to come back to. But let's get to the problem with China, for example.
Yes.
The problem with China is because the loans they give out to Africa, they don't have conditionalities. And again, if the US is going to be supporting democracy, they need good governance and all that. So what is the problem with that? I mean, they cannot just throw out money because, okay, we are fighting China. We don't. I think the problem the US has had is, you know, being the good boy, playing good cop in Africa and making sure. I mean, you pointed out their hypocrisy when it comes to the dictators. But I think where China has succeeded is it has been able to loan out this money to African countries at what rate, but the conditionalities in terms of good governance and all that has not been there. And I think that is what the US is. That's the challenge the US face. Isn't that a good problem to have?
You know, you and I have said a couple of times that we work together. So I think people are going to say, oh, they practice all this, because I agree with you on that as well. In fact, again, because I want to see Africa, we want to see Africa progress. It is heartbreaking that the US has important cards it could play that will help Africa progress properly and will help the US as well, but it is not playing them. And let me turn it on the point that you raised on the issue of democracy. Lambert, I happen to believe very strongly that Africa needs democracy. Every African country. A major reason is because practically all of our countries are multicultural, okay? People who speak different languages, different cultures. In such situations, dictatorships are toxic and incendiary because people see them through ethnic eyes. It's like, okay, that guy is from that ethnic group and they are oppressing everybody. So we need to have good voting. I mean, Mr. Museveni of Uganda once said that because we have such diversity in African countries, actually democracy is bad for us. So one of the NGOs that I formed was actually a counterpoint to him. My point is precisely because we are so diverse, we need democracy. So we can elect people based on their policy and their character and ideology, not because of their ethnicity. So Africa needs democracy. Now, if Africa needs democracy, look at the big powers. Which one is the most democratic? America has democratic deficiencies. I don't have to tell anybody, okay? You just read the newspapers. President Trump's name is on 2 or 3 stories today. So you know Americans' democracy is not perfect. But my point is, America's democracy is far better than anything that China can bring. It's far better than anything that Russia can bring because the U.S. is a democracy. Africa needs democracy. But the U.S., as you and I are agreeing, they only pay lip service to the democracy. If they were serious about democracy, and I have been doing this work since the year 2001, okay? I have been doing it for more than 40 years. I'm getting the dates wrong, but I've been doing it for more than 40 years, and we've always been pushing for democracy. I cut my teeth on the anti-apartheid movement, saying South Africa needs democracy, not white supremacy that puts Nelson Mandela in jail. Okay, it took a grassroots movement to force American administrations to remove their support from the apartheid regime in South Africa. The point is the U.S. is a democracy. It is not perfect, but too often it doesn't support democracy in Africa. And my argument is if it did support democracy in Africa, Africans would like the United States far more than they like China. Okay, right now, when the U.S. is putting all sort of say, okay, we're going to compete with the Chinese in economic terms, the Chinese, they have very few scruples. If the president of China wants money in Africa, he will get it in there within weeks. If President Biden wants to give Africa money, there will be all kinds of roadblocks in Congress and everywhere, and it will take months and years. So African leaders like getting money from China. Is it good for Africa? I don't think so. But the U.S. needs to give Africans a better option. And I'm saying it has to start with democracy because I will tell you, African countries need democracy very badly because of the structure of multicultural structure of our societies. There is a war in Ethiopia. Many people have looked at it differently. Part of what makes it so dangerous is that it's beginning to take on ethnic character. Okay, we've had ethnic tinged wars. Of course, there's Rwanda. There was one in Liberia. Okay, Kenya just voted. 2007, when they voted, there was election violence along ethnic lines. Okay, so Africa needs democracy just to make sure that we don't blow up into ethnic tinged conflicts. And because of that, we need democracy. And I'm saying of the big powers on the Security Council, the one that has the most democracy that we can use the most is the United States. Some might say, what about Europe? Europeans are deeply racist. Look at the slave trade and look at how many Africans they forced to die in the Mediterranean, even as we speak.
Again, I'm sure you are going to receive some threats after this for saying that the Europeans are more racist than Americans. But
well, not by much, but I'm saying that a lot of people focus on American racism, and the Americans themselves push back against that. Also, because there is almost 40 million people of African descent. So U.S. racism, it gets talked about more than Europe. I mean, with Black Lives Matter, you hear people in Europe saying like, oh, that's the Americans, they do this, we don't do that. And I'm saying, don't be fooled. The Europeans are extremely racist. But in fact, because there are very little non-white communities in Europe to push back, it's not much talk about. Just because it's not talked about doesn't mean it's not there. In fact, it is deeply there.
So,
and let me get the pushback.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's a conversation we can have on a different day. But again, your points with respect to the point you made, and I just wanted to read from the document itself. When it's talking about China, it says the People's Republic of China, by contrast, sees the region as an important arena to challenge the rules-based international order, advance its own narrow commercial and geopolitical interests, undermine transparency and openness, which is what we've been talking about, and weaken U.S. relations with African peoples and governments. And I think the point you are making is America should not be complaining, okay, because they have China has fewer Africans in China than the U.S. has here. And they are not making use of the Africans here, and they're only complaining about. I think that's a great point.
Precisely.
But you see, the problem with Africa again has been the fact that with these loans, and I know the recent example of Zambia, because Zambia has a debt with China that they are still struggling to see how to come to. And I know the U.S. has been struggling to help Zambia negotiate that. With that negotiation, they're able to have technically a bailout by the IMF. But there's no way, I don't see how America is going to catch up with China and Africa. I don't know what's your assessment of that.
I think you are right when it comes to the economics of it. I mean, economic investment, okay? And it's almost like we are repeating the last question discussion. The point is that, to me, America's comparative advantage would lie in the area of democracy, because China doesn't even pretend that it is a democracy, okay? I teach a bit of China's governance and a bit of their history, just a little bit, because China says, look, our state has existed for 5,000 years. But if you look at them just since the Second World War, some of the things that they have done, you will see they say, look, we have tried democracy. We are not a democracy. We don't like it. It doesn't work. It's not good for modern times. For modern times, you need communist dictatorship. Although they call themselves a communist country, but they practice capitalism. That's how they got rich, okay? So my point is, one of its major advantage, as we have said, is that one is the demographics. It has a lot of people of African descent, but it also has a democracy issue. They should be pushing that. And I can bet you Lambert, I mean, I am sure you will agree with me. If you talk to ordinary Africans, African leaders, like we've said, they can get easy money from China. They can get showcase infrastructure projects that people will see. But when you talk to the African people themselves, below the leaders, they are not they are not big fans of the Chinese. Okay, they are not. The US, on the other hand, it has a lot of goodwill among Africa's populace. Okay, and if this boost, if they put a lot of energy into their promotion of elections and other aspects of democracy, I am saying it will really increase US interest and popularity in the United States. They have a section in the paper called Open Societies, which is just another term for democratic societies. And they say, we are for it. And my reaction is, amen. I'm glad you are for it. Those are words. Now put those words into action. Withdraw your support from dictators. And we know who those dictators are. Okay? Withdraw your support from them. Put your support behind good, clean elections, behind civil society, behind incorruptible judges. Now, the paper says that, okay, they want to do that. The question is, are they just saying it or will they do it? Because at the end of the day, when we look, a number of African dictators get a lot of money from the United States because the US, to a certain extent, likes the way that they vote in the UN and likes it that they can pick up the phone and say, well, we need some soldiers here, or we need you to do this. The US is better off supporting the people and democracy rather than supporting the dictators.
Thank you very much, Nii. And just before we go on, I forgot to indicate at the beginning that for all the broadcasts I'm going to do in August, I'm going to be asking people to donate some money to a foundation, the Menden Foundation. The Menden Foundation is a foundation created by some ex-students of Sacred Heart College. That's the college I went to in Cameroon, and they are providing some grants for students who are unable to go to school because of the war that is going on in the northwest and southwest regions of Cameroon. So again, I have pledged to the Menden Foundation that I'm going to do this every time I come on air so that we can raise some money to send some children. So you can do a Zelle, and that is mendenfoundation@gmail.com, or PayPal, same thing, mendenfoundation@gmail.com. Cash App, you have the number there, 404-488-5838, and you have their website. Please, every little bit, a $10, a $50, a $20, $100, whatever you can donate is going to help children in Cameroon, in the warring provinces of Cameroon that are unable to because of the war. Support this, and you'll be contributing towards the education of a young man. After all, the document itself says the future of Africa, the future of the world is going to pass through Africa, because I think it's 2050, 1 in 4 young people in the world will be in Africa. And that's a great number. So please donate to this cause. And again, at the end of the month, I'll be able to tally to see how much has come for that cause. That goes directly to the foundation. The Cash App, the Gmail, all of that is for the foundation. So thank you. But Nii, let's focus, and I want us to zero in. I was struck by one thing, the use of the term open society. And I know that you and
Yes.
George Soros, you are great pals. But that really struck me, because I know that the Open Society also gives it funds CSIS programs. And I was wondering whether, as an owner of that this document has deliberately used that term, open societies. And just to tag on to that, because it is strange, Open Societies is a great foundation, isn't it, that does a lot of great work in Africa, and isn't it a problem when you see terms like this explicitly drawn out from these foundations into official documents like this that could, get a backlash from the Republicans who are saying that this is some left-wing propaganda that's being pushed out from Washington, D.C.?
Well, to confess, you've caught me by surprise. I did work for the Open Society. You mentioned that they have programs in Africa. I was actually one of the handful of people who got it established in West Africa. Now it covers all the ECOWAS countries plus Cameroon, and it's called OSIWA, and it supports basically supports civil society, because you can't have open societies without strong civil society. That's what it does. It promotes democracy. They use the term open society because the founder, George Soros, when he studied as a young man in London, one of the professors that really captivated him and he learned a lot from said that the difference between democracies and dictatorships is that democracies are open societies. Things are discussed in the open, different views are heard. Dictatorships are closed societies, okay? And so that's what it meant. But to your point that won't it's a surprise that it's found its way into a federal U.S. government federal document, and how the Republicans will react to that. I'm confessing that I hadn't considered that at all. So it surprises me. On the other hand, I mean, part of the democratic system in the U.S., which is you have two main parties. So if in 2025 it's not the Democrats are having another president, it will be the Republicans. The thing is, everybody throws out what the other has been doing, most of it. We began by asking why this document is coming in after almost more than almost 20 months,
Yeah.
20 months before coming in, because they have to put in place their own thing. So I'm saying whatever they call their document, the Republicans will not like it. And when they come in, the next time the Republicans come in, they will issue their own Africa policy, and yes, they will throw things out. Earlier on, we mentioned Prosper Africa. I think actually Prosper Africa was John Bolton and the Republicans. They brought it in. Sometimes, policies get carried over, but not many. And certainly the names and labels put on them are slapped. And Lambert, if you forgive me, I was wondering, of course, that Biden is thinking of bringing African leaders here in December. I think that is something that your audience should keep in mind also. And we want them to be able to treat the Africans when they come here, treat them well, and discuss with them issues that are important for the continent, and that will help, because we've seen what they did when they did the Summit of the Americas, okay? So we don't want Africa treated any less than the Americas were treated.
Thank you very much, Nii. And the remainder of the time, let's just go through. There are 4 policy areas. The first one talks about foster openness and open societies. We have talked a lot about that. And again, just to your point, I mean, maybe just to highlight that. The second one, deliver democratic and security dividends. We have had more coups in Africa over the last two years, isn't it? At a time when democracy was rising, call it, in Africa. What is happening to the continent at this time that things are, backsliding, that we are getting military coups and military takeovers?
Well, in my personal opinion, I've watched this fairly closely, is that actually the two of the biggest coups, the most concerned in Mali, which had 2 coups made by the same putschists, okay? I think there and Burkina Faso, they were coups related to insecurity, okay? The soldiers were complaining that they were not, you asked why we need external help. They said they were not getting external help to fight the terrorists. So the soldiers were being killed. The populace was insecure. You can even see ordinary Burkinabe at some point say, no, our lives are not secure. And you can't blame them. I mean, if terrorists were all over America blowing up Americans and the government doesn't seem to do anything about it, people will be upset. Now, having said that, I'm not justifying the coups at all. In fact, I think the coups make things worse. But I'm saying we need to understand why 2 of them were linked to conflict and terrorism, and the fact that the government did not seem to be able to protect the people. The one in Guinea, where Alpha Conde was overthrown, was a different issue. The military felt that he manipulated the constitution for a 3rd term and they overthrew him. But even there, My thinking is coups don't make things better, they make them worse. If there is a problem, the problem should be resolved through voting and through the courts. Because coup makers, when they come in, nobody can debate with them, nobody can argue with them, nobody can look over their shoulders. So yes, coups are a backsliding, but we have to understand why they happen. We must put a stop to them. I do commend ECOWAS for pushing all the three countries to say, you need to hold elections. You, the soldiers, don't belong in power. It's been a back and forth. Now, you are right. I noticed in the document that the U.S. talk about the coups, but I was chuckling to myself. They talk about recent coups because part of my grievance is that President Sisi in Egypt made a coup. And when he made a coup, he was a U.S. ally, okay? He's still a U.S. ally. So the U.S. should be against all coups, not just some coups.
Now, I think if there's a coup in Cameroon, the US should actually support that kind of a coup. But that's a conversation. I'm surprised in your previous point, you were talking about no mention of Europe, but you know that the US default policy towards Africa has been to a large extent surrendering to the French to take control. And that is why even
Precisely.
this.
But in fact, okay, of course, I mean, my interviewing skills need a lot of improvement. This is the point that I was trying to make, that they don't mention Europe because, in fact, from my observation, they seem to have said, okay, if there is a problem in Africa, especially a security problem, we want the French and the rest of Europe to take care of it, okay? Other administrations were doing it without saying it. With the Biden administration, I've been incensed because I will tell you again, I think they are an improvement over the administration they displaced. But President Biden went to the Vatican because he is a devout practicing Catholic. So he met with Pope Francis. From there, last October, he went straight to the French embassy in the Vatican, had a discussion with President Macron, basically apologizing because France felt stabbed in the back over a nuclear submarine deal in Australia, the AUKUS deal. And part of the apology from the US, Macron said, okay, if you are apologizing, then that means you support everything we do in Africa. And they said, okay. Okay, and a couple of weeks before that, Mr. Blinken had also been in Paris and had said to Yves Le Drian pretty much the same thing. When it comes to fighting terrorists in Africa, the French will take the lead and will support them. And my question is, you know, the United States gives a lot of military help to Europe. But when it comes to Africa, it's the same Europeans that need American help because their own military muscle is not strong, good enough to protect themselves. They say, oh, take care of the African security problem. And the other thing that I have against Europe doing that is that Europe's real intent in Africa, in my view, as I said, they are deeply racist. People should not think they are not. They are. It's just less talked about than what happens in America. But the second thing is, they have two policies, two priorities that are more important to them than security of Africans. Number one is they don't want any African immigrants in Europe, period. So when they say they are doing security work, is to say, okay, let's make sure that no Africans are getting to Europe, okay? And the few that get through to in the Mediterranean, they are dying in droves. And the second priority that the Europeans have in Africa, which again is not the security of Africans, it is to make sure that they corner the market on African resources, because these are the former colonies. During the colonial era, we know how much extraction they did. We are in the post-colonial era, they still want to monopolize the extraction. So they are more interested in extracting resources. They are more interested in stopping Africans from getting to Europe, but they do that under the guise of, oh, we're going to help them with their security. So this is the point I was trying to make, that it is curious to me that there isn't a lot of mention of Europe. There's mention of, somebody counted and said there's mention Russia is mentioned 7 times. China is mentioned a few times as well. There isn't much mention of Europe. So Lambert, this is the point that I was trying to make, and I think you extracted it well with your question. I didn't do a good job the first time, but yes, Europe's role in Africa is problematic. Part of it is Europe says, okay, now we want a better relations with Africa. If it were left to me, if for 2 seconds I was elected by Africans to say something on this, I'll say, before we have good relations with you, you need to confess all that you have done for 5 centuries, okay? And you need to return all of the cultural artifacts that you took away, okay? And you need to do a proper apology. The king of Belgium, the current king, was in Kinshasa a couple of months ago following on Lumumba's tooth. And he said, okay, I'm here because we don't like what happened. I won't apologize. I will also only say we regret. We regret, but we don't apologize. Macron did the same thing in Algeria. Okay? In this day and age, Europeans, after centuries of brutalizing Africa, can't even bring themselves to say what we did was wrong and we apologize. They say they will not apologize. And they are keeping African artifacts all over Europe. So we have to deal with that before you can say, okay, we'll have a fresh partnership with them. So I'm coming back to your point that, yes, I think it's a big mistake for the US to say or imply or act that when it comes to Africa, they want the Europeans to take the lead. The Africans don't want the Europeans. If the US persists in doing that, they will find out that the Africans may rather embrace the Chinese than the Europeans. And the Chinese, you know, they are no angels, and they are fond of telling Africans, we never enslaved you, but the Europeans enslaved you. But Africans don't need reminding of that. We know that.
So thank you very much, Nii, and have a great debate on geopolitical affairs affecting the African continent. Thank you, Professor Akuetteh, and the host, Lambert. Thank you very much, Edin Gang. And 2 more issues, then we can wrap it up. We already have, we had a network issue before. I know I promised you 1 hour, and thank you for your time, Nii. I don't take this for granted.
It's a pleasure.
We talked about the strategy. The document talks about strategic objectives, foster openness and open societies, deliver democratic and security dividends, advance pandemic recovery and economic opportunity, and of course, the last one, support conservation, climate adaptation, and the just energy transition. We're going to have time with this series to go through each of them. But when it goes over, there's something that I want us to touch on before we leave, because it goes on to talk about, you know, what are some of the issues that they would like to address. And the second thing, when it says elevate the US-African partnership, engage more African states, bolster civil society, transcend geographic seams. This is what is interesting. It talks about engage America's African diaspora. And I'm like, wow. Finally, there's some talk about engaging America's African diaspora. And when they go into talk about the diaspora, the first line there says, our African diaspora is a source of strength. It includes African Americans, descendants of formerly enslaved Africans, and nearly 2 million African immigrants. And I think that for a long time, we African immigrants in the United States have failed ourselves to come to the table, which is where we took off from. The African Americans who are here, and I want to praise the Biden administration. From the vice president, the second in command at Treasury is Nigerian American. There are a series of
Wale Adeyemo.
Yes, there are a series of African, call it first generation Africans who are here, second generation Africans who are part of the Biden administration. You can look across the board, and that's a good thing. But I think we of the African diaspora, we have not done our continent well in a certain sense in engaging the political environment in order to bring the requisite change. That may be an overstatement, but what's your assessment?
Actually, I think it's an understatement, and because I think that is the key. And again, you are far more articulate than I am, because I've tried to touch on this like 3 times, and sometimes I use ADNA. I am saying we have to force the government to do it. By we, and of course, as you mentioned, I was born in Ghana, but I've lived almost twice as long in the US as I lived in Ghana before coming here. Okay, there is you. I saw that almost 2 million number, but of course the numbers, people share different numbers. I was telling someone, I mean, I had a Sierra Leonean friend who said to me, "Oh, Nii, we and our children, those of us born in Africa who live here now, and our children, we are about 5 million." But okay, I'm not going to argue with the White House about 2 million people of African descent, people born in Africa who are here. But the point you are making, and the point that I'm supporting you on, is we have to take the lead and push. I don't mind telling you, when President Obama was elected in November of 2008, I had a piece published saying that we are so happy. People were dancing everywhere here and on the continent. I said, what we need to do is to organize so we can push him to do things that help. If we don't, he won't. And of course, sadly, I wish I was proven wrong. We didn't organize enough. Now I have Africans who tell me, well, his father was from Kenya, but he didn't do much for Africa. And I say, yeah, because we didn't do what we needed to do. Okay. So it's better late than never. We need the African bonds here. We need to come together, be the tip of the spear, organize properly, link up with African Americans who have done. I mean, I'm lost for words if we start talking about the history of African Americans and how they have opened the way for us. Even African independence owes a lot to African Americans. Okay, so if we link up with them, and as you mentioned, look at all the people of African descent in the Biden administration, which actually makes it a shame, because I don't think, I'll go out on a limb, I don't think you can go through US, all the American presidencies, and President Biden is number 46. You can go through all of them. I don't think any of them has had as many people of African descent in the upper echelons than President Biden has. And so if we say that his policies are not as strong or as good as we would like, we need to look in the mirror, because we haven't made it clear to them. You mentioned that there are a lot of them. In fact, there are a lot of people of African descent even in the National Security Council. You'll be surprised to learn.
So thank you, and I think this is a call to arms. I mean, let's put our act together. And like I said, this is the beginning. This is the first of a series of conversations we are going to be having around this policy. We are going to dissect and digest the policy over the next couple of months. But I'm sure you will not forgive me, even though you mentioned it at the beginning, if we did not go back to the forthcoming US Africa Summit that is in December 13th to December 15th. What is it? What do you anticipate? You mentioned it in passing, talked about it. What is your expectation of this summit? What are the mistakes the US should not make again, like they did in 2012, the last one?
Well, yes, the mistake that the US should not make, and you'll forgive me for linking it quickly to the document. In the document, part of it they say is, look, there is a change. The document actually says we are looking forward because the world has changed. I agree with them. Since the world has changed, since Russia and China are so aggressive, and I, for one, I don't think it's a bad thing for the US to say, when it comes to Africa, we want to be Africa's best partner rather than the Chinese being Africa's best partner. Some people say that's a Cold War. I don't see it as a Cold War. I think we Africans want the competition between the superpowers, then we can pick what is good for us. So with the summit, I think the summit is an opportunity. And actually, when it comes to summits, the US is sadly behind. You know, China does its own summit with the Africans, okay? And it does it every 2 years. No, I think every 3 years. They do it in China, then they do it in Africa. They've done it 8 times. if Biden does this, it will be only the second time, because Obama did the first one in 2014 when Biden was the vice president. Okay, and so if you seize it as we say, this is a new era. Great power competition is heating up, and therefore we're going to do it. Guess who else is doing it? Russia has done it. Okay, they did it in Sochi, and Lavrov was just on the continent and said, okay, we're going to do another one next year. So Russia is going to do another one, okay? And Russia doesn't have many Africans in Russia, not compared to the United States. But they are going to do their second summit with the African leaders. So the point is there's a competition in summit leaders. Now, what should the U.S. do? The U.S. should make sure that it consults Africans here, African Americans here, and the African leadership and African civil society to come up with programs that address the concerns of Africa, so that on the 15th, when the final day of the summit, we want to see declarations, announcements of programs with real money behind them, not just words, because we don't want the Africans to come here in the middle of winter, December, a few, like what, 10 days before Christmas, in the dead of winter, to come to Washington and go back, come here just to talk and go back. It won't be good for Africa, and it won't be good for the U.S.
So again, thank you very much, Nii, and we look forward to, like I said, every Wednesday we are going to come back to dissect this. We're going to have different guests and all that. In the few minutes that we have left, I've gone 16 minutes over time that I promised you because the document is just too rich. Do you have any last words?
Yes, my last words are that while you can find areas in the document that you can say, okay, this could have been said better or this should have been covered, there is enough there that we need to use as a blueprint, as a roadmap, to say now, this is what you said, these are words on paper, now we want you to do it. So it should be the roadmap for ADNA, for the larger African immigrant community, for the larger African diaspora community. That is really what we need, because the U.S. relations with Africa under this Biden administration, which, as we have said over and over, has so many people of African descent in it. And of course, we didn't even mention almost 50 members of Congress who are of African descent. He has appointed a Supreme Court justice, the first Black woman Supreme Court justice. So there is a lot of Black people in the the Biden administration. So we need to push to make sure that I use those people to strengthen the relationship, positive relations between Africa and the United States, because the relationship is nowhere near as strong or as positive as it should be, but we must make it happen. The first step starts with us.
So thank you very much, Nii Akuetteh. Nii Akuetteh is an Africa policy analyst, a member of the Advocacy Network for Africa. I define it as a think tank based in Washington, D.C., made up of grassroots organizations that are advocating for different issues related to Africa. Like you've seen, 1 hour has not been enough, can never be enough for us to, we just started scratching the surface. There's a lot in the document, and we are going to continue these discussions every Wednesday to get an understanding of what the strategy is and to push the administration to be able to match words and action. I want to thank you for watching. If you are not yet subscribed, please go to the YouTube channel, The Lambom Show, and subscribe, share the broadcast so that we can get many more people to have these conversations with us. I also want to make an appeal on behalf of the many unfortunate children, young people in Cameroon who are caught in the war and unable to go to school because they lack the means. There's a foundation that I am supporting in the month of August. They are going back to school in September. If you are moved, kindly consider making a contribution. Menden Foundation. You have Zelle, you have PayPal, you have Cash App, and you can go to their website. Once more, thank you for listening. Great evening, and enjoy the rest of it. Thank you, and bye-bye.